Good evening. Welcome to the latest instalment of the Tunnel podcast. It is our Scottish Premiership focus, and delighted to say we've got a couple of stellar guests tonight. We've got Glen, is it Schreuder? Have I pronounced that right, Glen? Glen Schreuder from the Aberdeen podcast here. And we've got McEwan as well, freelance journalist, should I say, and obviously podcast Alan Connor Chalmers joins us as well. So there's loads to get through. There was an action-packed weekend full of incident. I'll start with you, Connor, because we spoke obviously throughout the week about Willie Collum's. He was out sort of publicising how good the work was that the SFA were doing, how transparent they were going to be, and lo and behold, the weekend is jam-packed full of shall we say, instances that have been, well marked by managers tonight, with Tony Docherty coming out and saying he's been offered an apology already.
I mean, certainly, he said the weekend for hell there, Willie Collum. I mean, after doing that show last week, he'd have been hoping, just give me a nice, quiet weekend, and I mean, it was anything but. The Tony Docherty one is funny. I mean, I remember saying to you yesterday that maybe it was just in the clip that BBC showed, maybe they didn't show a long enough clip, but in that clip, he never mentioned a thing about the penalty they should have got. He did, he spoke at length about the Ross County penalty, of course, but he never spoke about the penalty that Dundee should have got. So which amazed me, because it was a Stonewall penalty kick. And then, of course, now it's come out, Willie Collum's obviously been in contact with him, offered that apology, which, fair play to Willie Collum, because I think under the previous administration, Crawford Allen was never quick to get in touch with managers. He usually resisted it for as long as he could. So Reece Collum's been a bit more approachable, I suppose, over it. But it has been a nightmarish weekend. Like I said, I mean, listen, not all of the decisions were wrong. There were some good decisions made in there. But the problem is that the bad decisions were really bad. I mean, they weren't just, these ones that you can maybe justify and say, well, subjective, or it's, maybe there's an excuse for VAR not to get involved. They were blatant decisions that VAR, I mean, it still amazes me. I don't know about Glenn and Michael, but it absolutely astounds me that in an age where we have VAR and they're looking at these replays the same as everybody else does sitting at home watching it, how they can look at it and not send a referee to the monitor. How can you look, for example, at Sean Rooney volleying Kyle Vassell twice on the deck and not send a ref to the monitor? I don't know how you can look at that and not think there's at least serious foul play, if not violent conduct there. And the same with the Dundee penalty. How can you look at a clear outstretched leg which trips Simon Murray and not send the ref to the screen when he's obviously missed it? It baffles me. I mean, VAR is brought in so those decisions in particular, the blatant ones, are not being getting wrong. So I think Willie Collum is probably going to have to chew out a few people this week.
I guess consistency is all we ask for in Scottish football on that point, Connor, and that's what we're not seeing at this point. Obviously, Derek McInnes was very vocal in his criticism, and obviously not as a Kilmarnock or St Mirren fan, I was watching Sports Scene in disbelief that incident you were speaking about Vassell wasn't even looked at, and I was like, I'm just glad that wasn't in the Aberdeen game.
Michael, does it set a precedent now that these wrong decisions, managers are going to be looking for explanations week in, week out?
I think for years we've kind of said the SFA is about old school, but when Willie Collum comes up with this program on Bywits on YouTube once a month, and to be honest, I would like to see it once a week. I would actually like to see it in Sports Scene as well after the highlights as well, because it would fit in well with your Saturday night and all that. So I think Willie Collum's bringing it kind of like up to date as well, but we'll see how long it kind of lasts. It's a kind of honeymoon period in Scottish football for like 2 minutes, and then it'll be a manager phoning them all week trying to get answers. But no, it's a good idea what he's brought in, but I would just like to see it every week and skeg it off every month.
Do you know the thing, Robert, as well, that's going to be a headache for him? See, when he does do the next VAR show, which will be 3 weeks tonight, that'll go out. You imagine that the audio for these instances is going to have to be shown, because I mean, they're so blatant, people are going to know. The headache for him is going to be, how is he going to justify what he's hearing for the VAR room? Because I'd love to know the conversation that happens between the VAR official and Matthew McDermott on the pitch in Paisley when Sean Mooney's volleying Kyle Vassell twice. I'd love to hear. I can't wait to hear what was it Greg Aitken, I think it was, who's in the VAR. What is he saying there? Is he? What does he think he's seen there? That there's no obscure view or anything like that. It is literally blatantly in front of you. And the problem that Collum's going to have is he's there obviously trying to talk about what the procedure is and VAR should be involved here and not here and all this sort of stuff. But he's going to have to just.
We've just lost him sound-wise, haven't we? That happened to you the other night, Connie. You've just dipped out. Gonna come to you, just because I actually do think Michael's got a point. It was all positive, and it was obviously trying to offer up some sort of transparency along with the consistency that you were asking for. However, it couldn't have happened, I say, at a worse time. You've gone from this, as I say, super high position of positivity, and he's come out explaining the decisions, and he was also sort of saying that, in terms of getting the referees to a better level and back into national competition, and then we have just a weekend like we have. I think probably only your game was without incident, to be brutally honest. Every other game had something in there. So is it a case where Connor's saying it'd be nice to hear the audio of these instances, but from the first episode he kind of held his hands up to the certain ones that they got wrong, and then backed up by saying that the referees are being trained on these set of instances. That's only going to hold water for so long, isn't it?
It is, and there's two teams in particular in this league that's only going to hold water for so long and before the pressure really grows. And I think the Dundee penalty in the derby that was obviously spoken about, where Willie Collum said that should have been checked. I think the thing with VAR, and I've always said it on our own show, is every decision is subjective to your own personal view. One referee is going to view that as get the referee over, that's a penalty, and the other one's going to go, there's, as Willie said, nobody was around him and it wasn't affecting a Dundee United player attacking the ball, so he can understand why it's left. But again, it goes back to what I said, you want to see the same method of thinking applying to every decision, but we're not getting that. And unfortunately, Scottish football seems to only ever learn on the job. And then you'll always get, and I think it happened this weekend at Celtic Park with a couple of the handball decisions, people then referencing back to Conor Barron from the first weekend at Tynecastle where that wasn't given. So again, where was the consistency on that?
Michael, do you think that the lack of consistency comes from, just a lack of understanding on the referee's part? Because you see at Celtic Park, Colin Stephen gives the first one, which probably would have been a penalty last season. But then this new derivative that's coming in from Willie Collum now seems to say that, proximity comes into it. So therefore, it isn't a penalty.
I was at the game on Saturday, Robert, and to be honest, I've only saw Colin Stevens. I think it's Colin Stevenson or Steven. I can't. I've only saw him once, but to be honest, that was the second time I saw him on Saturday, and I wasn't impressed with him for both sides as well. But I mean, I know that we're going to talk about VAR and all that, but nobody actually speaks about the fans, because the fans are paying hard-earned cash to go to the games. And like, if you go to Ibrox or Parkhead, all you see is VAR checking. All depends if you text your pal or whoever else watching the game in the house, because you don't actually see a replay in the big monitor at the games. And I feel as though that, the support that football has got to listen to their paying customers, and basically that's the fans, and they're not really getting listened to in terms of, like, if they're bringing in VAR, they need to do it properly, they need to have the whole experience as well. I think that, listen, I would maybe touch upon as well is, like, and I've always said this as well, it's funny, but it's actually true as well. Like, when you go back to the pub or whatever else is after the game and you go in a supporters bus, you back in the day you would speak about, oh yeah, that was a brilliant goal, that was a brilliant game, but now you speak about you speak about VAR for half an hour and you forget about I was at Ibrox to get Rangers played well, Aberdeen played well, kind of thing. So I think that the supporters that have been missing and all this as well, and it's all like what they call them doing videos and blah 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 and stuff like that, but you kind of feel a bit sorry for the supporters because they're paying big bucks to go to the games week in, week out.
Colin, is that a fair point that, what Michael's saying there, that supporters are then sort of dwelling on VAR decisions rather than reveling in the game? Or is it, fair to say that regardless of VAR was there or not, we'd still be bemoaning football refereeing decisions, in the pub after the game anyway? Yeah, you're still undecipherable. I don't know what's happened there. I'll put that point to you, Glenn. Is it a case that that you'd be moaning the referee anyway? There just seems to be a big hype around VAR at the moment, especially in Scotland.
I think Michael's made some good points there, but I think you're right, Robert. Like, you would be just bemoaning the referee, like, oh, how did he not spot that foul? Or whereas now we're going, I can't believe that's gone to VAR. And I think for the point Michael's making is about the match day fan is recently, I was up at Dingwall for Ross County Aberdeen. The time it took to decide on the Slobodan Rubezic goal that wasn't because it was awarded, was it over the line, was it not? The first thing they should have checked was the ball over the line, yes or no? For some reason, they then went on to proceed to check if it was offside. So for me, from the life of me, I couldn't understand why from the replays they didn't realise the ball wasn't over the line, that they then needed to go and check the offside. But it just seemed to be a constant wait, and that is not enjoyable as a football fan. So you're almost bemoaning the referee, you're bemoaning the time it's taking, and as Michael says, you're then almost ignoring some of the good passages of play that are in your match.
I think as well. Sorry, Robert. I think I would just say quickly there. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Glenn. But like when you're seeing the thing up in the mortar, they might not be actually checking that decision. It might be, two steps back and the play kind of thing, So then you actually got to get pinned on your pals or whoever is watching the game in the house or the pub or whatever to say, oh, by the way, it wasn't that handball, it was the phase before then as well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Connor, you're back with us, and we can hear you definitely now. I could hear your mic before, so that's good news. Just on what Glenn's saying there about checks taking so long, and Michael saying there obviously that it's impacting on your experience inside the ground. Is this just another sort of example of having a part-time sort of refereeing body in that they can't spend that much time together? They can't be putting in the work that maybe the English counterparts are putting in, which I think Collum alluded to in some of the work he done last week.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's a huge part of it. I've never quite understood why they can't just show the replay of what they're checking in the ground. I mean, every ground has got a screen somewhere. Why not just show it? It doesn't make sense. There's no reason not to do it. Some people try and justify it. I can't think of a logistical reason why you couldn't do it. I also think as well, the experience of watching it on the television at home is significantly dampened by VAR discussions as well, because when you're watching a game at home and you're listening to the commentary, the amount of times, because they can hear what's going on in the VAR room and we can't, and they'll sit and tell you, oh, well, they're having a check here, or he's just looking at this, and then it amounts to nothing, because 9 times out of 10, I mean, VAR is always checking, it's always looking at things, right? That's his job. And when they're telling you all these different things, a corner kick comes in, for example, they're like, oh, VAR will have a wee look at this here, there might have been a tug here or whatever. And it's like, why, that dampens the experience, because then you're sitting there as a fan, almost holding your breath going, especially if your team's on the attack for that corner, and because they're talking about a VAR check, you're thinking, well, do I get excited about this or do I not? Because is this going to get pulled back? Are we going to be, and that's ludicrous. The commentary teams need to stop doing that until such time as we see the referee actually halt a game for an actual proper check. They need to not be saying anything, because that isn't helping at all. I think, it's one of those things. There always would be talking points for games, right? I mean, I've been to a few lower league games in recent times. A friend of mine is an Airdrie fan, so being that I'm only up the road, I've attended a couple of their games, and I've seen some stinking decisions be made there. But there's no VAR to intervene. There's nothing like that, and you just get on with it. The discussion after it sometimes can be, how's the ref missed that? That's a poor decision. But the game flows a lot better because there is none of this nonsense of stopping and nobody knows what's going on. You can just get on with it and go, right, well, the ref's obviously missed that. He's made a mistake. And yeah, you'll have that talking point, but you'll be in the main end up talking about football and not, you certainly won't be talking about VAR. That being said, look, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. VAR is going nowhere. I know the English tried, or they had some sort of summit regarding it over the summer, but I just think the communication needs to be clear. I would quite like, for the referees, like they do in rugby with the TMO, to be mic'd up on the park and let the fans, if you're not going to show us, let the fans hear what the referee's talking about. Because that's the great thing about rugby. The experience they get is exactly what football fans should get. They can see the incident, they can hear the ref, they can hear the TMO, they know what's being checked. Even if you ultimately disagree with a decision, because you've heard the reasoning for why they've made that decision, it makes it easier at least to accept, and at least you're then debating the reason a decision's made rather than debating, what's going on, why has he made that decision, why is it, at least you're just going, well, he's made it because of this, so you can put your hat on that. So it does need to be better. Interestingly enough, Robert, I don't know if you know, I'll ask you. Willie Collum's obviously reached out to Tony Docherty, but has he spoke to Derek McInnes yet? Because St Mirren should have been down to 9 men. So I think he deserves an apology, particularly for the Rooney incident. Maybe he's just getting, going round the houses. Maybe he'll get round to it, but that'll probably be the next one we'll hear about, I suspect.
I listened to Stevie Robinson in the post-match, and he said that he felt sorry that Joe Wright had been sent off. He thought it was something or nothing. I dare say he probably changed his mind when he watched that back on Sports Scene. And listen, I think I have to agree with you. I watch a lot of English lower league stuff, and I go to my local club as well, and there's no VAR there, and as you say, the game just flows a little bit better, which I think is quite nice, quite a breath of fresh air when you're not having to mull over VAR decisions 4 or 5 times during the game. But Michael, can I final word to you then on this? As Connor says, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, which I love that. Do you think VAR we've just got to get on with it? It's here to stay. The refereeing body are obviously trying to do stuff to make it a bit more sort of under the radar, if that was the right phrase. Do you think it's something we can actually talk positively about? Because we've just spent 18 minutes. I don't think anyone said anything good about it.
Do we have to keep it? No, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, like, I would bin it tomorrow. I mean, a quick word on the Scottish Cup as well. Like, I don't understand, like, if, say, Aberdeen was playing Peterhead or whatever, like, they can't use it. But if Aberdeen was playing Peterhead at home, they would, because Aberdeen's, like, got the money. I mean, it's not fair that they're kind of like smaller clubs. They're going to use it. Keep it for the semi-finals and the final. And if you're not going to use it, well, don't use it at all. Because, like, I was watching the FA Cup, I think, last season at one of the games, and VAR wasn't involved, and it was brilliant. And you didn't have to think about VAR, so I would bin it tonight.
I think it's a great point you make, actually, about the cup competitions, both north and south of the border, where it's been used for some games and not the other. You're going about, a well-used Scottish phrase, sporting integrity, and that's got to be questioned, I think, certainly. Look, Glenn, I'm going to come to you because obviously, you're fresh from your Red Tinted Glasses episode, and Aberdeen are flying high. It has to be said. It must be great being a dandy at the minute, I must say. Just let's talk about Jimmy Talleen, because I'm getting labelled a fanboy here. I was on a podcast last night watching a lyrical about him. Seems to be Aberdeen who's just got the appointment spot on.
And it feels great, Robert, I tell you. I think even the most optimistic Aberdeen fan couldn't have dreamt how well the start under Jimmy's gone. I know you can caveat and say, obviously, we had the League Cup group stage draw, which was favourable. and then also following that up with Queen's Park and Spartans this weekend. But ultimately, yes, St Mirren and Kilmarnock came off of long European trips as well, but we can only beat what's in front of us. You just need to look at our record against both those clubs last season, where we struggled to even pick up 3 points against both of them. Jimmy's come in, and what I really liked about him, and I said this, I was on the Scottish Football Show last night. I think their episode comes out tomorrow, and so it's a little exclusive, I guess, before that drops. Jimmy Tilleen was at a supporters event last month, and he came out and was asked about how he hasn't judged any of the players, or did he judge any of the players based on how they played under Neil Warnock and Peter Leven. And his response was he didn't watch any of the games because he didn't want to judge any of the players, as he didn't know what instruction they'd been given. So how could he judge a player on their ability, not knowing what they'd been instructed to do during the game? And I think that's class to hear. And I can see you smiling, Robert, and that fanboy in you's just getting even higher. Because for a manager to have that level, to come into Cormack Park on his first day and wipe the slate clean for players as us as fans had probably written off their future. We're seeing it in Pape Habib Gueye. Who saw that coming? Channeling his inner Gareth Bale at the weekend. Vinny Bizawin as well, come off a successful loan at Emin and being involved. Shayden Morris, a player that was hooked after 22 minutes under Neil Warnock when we were 3-0 down to Motherwell because he could barely control a ball. Now has 5 assists and a goal this season. Things are going well. Look, I can see Connor's probably itching to say we've not been tested, and I know we've got a big month in October coming up, including, of course, playing both Celtic and Rangers. That will be the gauge of where this team really is. But as I said, we can only beat what's in front of us. We've done that, and we've put 15 points on the board. We've got that gap to Rangers right now, who sit in third, and we've got a 7-point gap to Dundee United in fourth. It's a great time.
Connor, I will bring you in because we spoke about inevitably there is going to be a bump on the road. There's no way Aberdeen are going to go invincible this season. It's all about how the manager...
Don't write us off yet.
I heard somebody use the phrase "champy dons," which I thought was fantastic. But yeah, look, Connor, as I say, this bump on the road may come in October. It may not, but I just think it's going to be interesting to see how Tilleen reacts to that. With Glen's little bit of insight there, you've got to say that the thinking of the man is maybe what you get when you go outside the box and a point from a foreign country.
Yeah, listen, you cannot deny how well Jimmy Tilleen has done at the start of this campaign. There's no getting away from that. He's had a terrific run, 10 wins out of 10. There's another club who've been desperate for 10 in a row for years and it's never happened. So, you've got to give credit where it's due. But I think he has done a superb job. But I'm not going to sit here and say, they've not played anybody or whatever. You've got to play what's in front of you. They've done that. They've done it well. And they've won in different ways. Not all of the games have been a case of them blowing teams away in the score sheet. I think you look at the cup game against Queen's Park, for example. That's a potential banana skin. And in the past, Aberdeen, even at Pittodrie, have had those struggles. I remember Stenhouse Muir going up to Pittodrie a couple of years ago. I'm sure Glen will not need reminding of that. But, it's happened in the past and they got through it. A tight game that was 0-0 for such a long time, they found a winner. And that's the important part for Aberdeen, is just keep winning games, ticking them off the list. I suspect, now they play Celtic before they play Rangers. They'll play Celtic on the 19th October at Parkhead before Rangers make the trip up north. Scarily for us the day before Halloween, so we'll hope that isn't a horror show. But I think...
You just got a wee bouquet of jokes tonight. You're on fire.
I think that I think Celtic will be the real litmus test that will tell you whether Aberdeen are truly a different animal. Purely because over the course of the last few years, it is well documented Aberdeen have struggled big time against Celtic. Other than that cup semi-final, which they were superb in, out of nowhere because you didn't feel they could compete, and they did. They got all the way to penalties, were denied a Stonewaller themselves when Junior Hoylett was just booted by Carter Vickers. And listen, my uncle's an Aberdeen fan, so I'm sure he wouldn't have been happy with that. But they need to start making inroads and performing better in that fixture. Because if they go to Celtic Park and they get absolutely annihilated like they did last season, it sets them back again. And it just makes people go, well, okay, it's still the same Aberdeen, really. Whereas if they go in, they compete. I'm not saying go and win there, but if they go and compete with Celtic and can go head to head and give a good account of themselves, I think that is important. Because the first trip to Parkhead last season in particular under Barry Robson was, by any standards, I think an embarrassment for Aberdeen. So trying to right that wrong would be a massive statement for Jimmy to lean.
I think it would just be great for that trip to Parkhead. It's interesting. I don't see Celtic as being the kind of test, because I'm going to sound like a Celtic fan in Europe, that budgets are going to come into it here where we can't compete with Celtic in terms of the money that they've got and the size of squad. And we definitely are still a work in progress. But as Connor says, that first trip to Parkhead last season under Barry Robson, I was just glad I was in Disneyland, because I think that was the 6-0 game. And I think our last 3 or 4 trips to Parkhead had been 5-0, 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, something ridiculous like that. So if we could, as Connor says, give a good account of ourselves at Parkhead, I'd be pleased. But I think from an Aberdeen point of view, October is going to be seen as the big test for us, but we've got Hearts at home, Dundee United at home, and Rangers at home just before Halloween, and potentially just before a League Cup semi-final, which could also be against Rangers, although I'm sure Dundee might have something to say about that. That is going to be a huge 5-6 fixtures coming up for Aberdeen, and if we could, especially in the home games, continue the fine form we've got at home, pick up a point at Parkhead, I think most of us would be satisfied with, then we could talk about a title challenge.
Well, Michael, I've got Celtic wrote down on my piece of paper and I've wrote who can stop them. I'm not saying for a minute that Aberdeen can go on and win the league, okay, but you've obviously watched a bit of Celtic this season. You know, they've blew Rangers away in the first Old Firm game of the season. I think we'll all agree there. Are Aberdeen genuinely able to go there and compete, as Connor said, or do you think the gap's just still too wide at the moment?
Well, first of all, I would like to say to Glen and the Aberdeen fans in the ball, well done for thinking outside the box. I'm comparing this one to Hibs in terms of, like, they went from a Scottish Cup winner and, you know, already won the first game of the weekend as well, but think outside the box. Thinking about Celtic with Postecoglou, okay, they never got off to a good start, but we knew how that ended at the end up as well. But yeah, I do think there's a bit of a gap there. And saying that, when people speak about gaps, okay, I know what they really mean, but you know, gaps as in you know, financial and all that. I don't think it's Celtic and Rangers' fault. How big the gaps are between Celtic and Rangers and the rest of the teams. It's just because of the league we're in. And I suppose you could bring the world at kind of like different teams as well. But yeah, I mean, I do think Celtic has got, but you know, they've got the manager that they wanted back in Brendan Rodgers, and they're starting to, you know, perform like the first season Rodgers was in as well. But yeah, I mean, it's I suppose what I'm trying to say in the roundabout way here is it's up to the other teams to maybe close that gap a wee bit in terms of like performances as well. I mean, look at Hearts at the weekend. Okay, Hearts were pretty poor going into Saturday's game, but they may get a bit of a game of it. But I don't know if that's because Celtic had most of the players around the world for the international games and you know, getting back together. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting you know, I think the big test will come when Celtic, Rangers and Hearts are in Europe as well. If tiredness comes into it as well. So yeah, but there's a bit of a gap in class there, yeah.
Well, if that's your excuse for the Hearts performance, that's good, because we go to Parkhead after the international break.
Brilliant. Like, just final one. Something you said earlier, it was about, obviously Jimmy Tulane improving players that were already there, and I think that's really important for a manager. Recruitment's great, and obviously it's the the thing that they're judged on most. But I think it's important to say that you've got to improve what you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also you've seen this season, you spoke about recruitment there, Robert. We've not really kind of utilised the loan market outside of Ante Palaversa. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if we've nabbed in Kevin Nisbet as well. But that's only 2 loan signings. In previous seasons, we've seen 3, 4, maybe even 5 loan signings. Obviously, I'm going back a bit where Jurgen Klopp cost us the league by recalling Danny Ward, and how much that loan market can impact us as well. So I think, by not bringing in a player from another club just to plug a gap for 6 months and trusting, as you say, what we've got and putting your full faith in them only brings out the confidence and ability which we're now seeing in certain players. And it's proving fruitful so far.
Okay, look, I'm conscious of time. I promise you guys half an hour. We've just slipped over that. But Connor, I just want to come to you quickly, obviously, on news today, big interview from Dave King. Obviously, John Bennett stepped down as chairman of Rangers, and Dave King sort of threw his hat in the ring. I think there's been water poured over that just before we came on air, by the way. But I want to make a point of some of the stuff that came out of that, particularly around, the club not being ran in the fashion that it had been left in. Player recruitment, contracts handed out. Is it just another sort of, I don't want to use that word, isn't it? Just another nail in the coffin almost, because it's been disaster after disaster from the start of the season for Rangers.
Listen, it's absolutely not ideal at all, is it? It just adds to the ever-growing list of issues that are happening right now. I mean, look, I always think people, and I've said this in the past, I think people look back in Dave King's tenure a bit too much with rose tinted glasses, to be honest with you, because you've got to remember, yes, eventually in the end he got it right, but it took him a hell of a long time to get there. He made some poor decisions in his time. We brought in Mark Warburton to get us out of the Championship. He did that, but then he was allowed to make a mockery of the club by basically booting us in the teeth and doing one and going to Nottingham Forest in a manner that just wasn't right. And then that left us in a position where, scrambling to find who's going to replace him. You put a Graham Murray in charge for a bit, and then we all know what happened with Pedro Caixinha, and that is squarely lies at the door of Dave King. You talk about signing policies. Look at the players he allowed Pedro Caixinha to sign, and he gave Caixinha some money as well to sign those players, and you're bringing in guys like a 38-year-old Bruno Alves, who, yes, at one point was a world-class defender, but was well past that at that stage in his career. Guys like Eduardo Herrera, who just didn't ever do anything. Carlos Pena was another one well past any kind of prime he had. He also had major attitude problems. I think the only 2 good ones he brought in were Morelos and Candeias. So I think there's some serious question marks over his decision making at that time as well. Yes, in the end up when he brought in Steven Gerrard, that came good. In a lot of ways, both he and Gerrard kind of got lucky because of COVID. Because that season, when it got curtailed in the January time due to COVID, we were 13 points behind Celtic at that point. And if that had continued the run of form that we were on and that gap had got bigger, there's every chance Gerrard would have been out of a job at the end of the season. But COVID came in and had other ideas, and then eventually we do stop 10 in a row, which was Dave King's remit.
But are you saying here that there's no need for concern about anything that he said because of his time in charge? Because to me, there was red flags throughout his interview on TalkSport this morning.
Yeah, well, listen, he threw up some red flags certainly, but I think, was there anything he said that Rangers fans haven't already been saying for a long time now? I don't think so. We've all recognised that there is that issue there. There is a lack of cohesion. There is no getting away from it. I mean, James Bisgrove stepped down as CEO at the tail end of May. Well, now, just past mid-September, still no CEO in place. We've now had a chairman step down, albeit for health reasons, and of course you wish him well, but a chairman who in the interim period there didn't do a good enough job for many people, gave an interview that didn't set to help at all, awarded a contract extension to a manager that didn't need it at that stage, that backs the club into a corner that if things aren't going well, he's just cost us more money to get rid of another manager. I'm not saying that will or won't happen, but that's the situation we're in. So everything he said we already knew. I think the problem with Dave King is that he's coming in into the woodwork having these pot shots. I don't think is necessarily helping matters either, though. You know, he was doing it before Bennett stepped down. There was a number of occasions there was quotes and comments coming out for Dave King. I think he's somebody that clearly, as you say, water's been poured over the idea of him coming back in any road. But again, if he had came back, I'm not sure whether it would have been a right decision or not for us. I think we need a strong voice in there who can actually, move the club in the right direction. Somebody that can come in and just overhaul the full thing, because that's what it needs. You need to look top to bottom and go, right, what is working here and what's not working? Why is there mixed messaging all the time? I mean, we've spoken about it during the summer, Robert. We kept being told we had no money, and then on transfer deadline day, down the back of the couch, we found £3.5 million to sign Barami. Now, I'm pleased that we did obviously bring somebody like that in. I think he'll be a good player for us, but where's that come from? If we've not got, you can't on one hand say we've not got any money, but then on the other hand say there's £3.5 million to sign up. You make your mind up, kind of thing. Especially when we didn't really bring in much money in during the window. We brought in a few quid, I suppose, $500,000 for Cantwell and stuff. But I think it's things like that need to change, and you need a proper, I think, sporting director in there to help do that. Some proper football minds and just a strong chairman that can go in and stand up for the best interests of the club and make the right decisions going forward. And I don't think a return for Dave King would have done that, because we've seen a bit of chaos in his time and how long it took him, and we just don't have that time again.
Glenn, is this, I know you don't want to talk about Rangers here, but is this a chance for Aberdeen in the sense that there seems to be a bit of a mess going on at Ibrox at the minute? Philip Clement is under pressure at every turn, it would appear. You look at the game at the weekend, start really well, and then there's an opportunity there. They don't really put the game to bed. So he's remonstrating with fans outside Ibrox before the international break. Are Aberdeen fans talking about this and saying they're there to be got at this year?
Quietly, just now, I think they would be. But as I said, once we've got that game out of the way in October, then we'll see where we are. I still think for me, October is the big month. And I think what will also be interesting to see is how Rangers then juggle that European to Sunday football. I don't think they're going to struggle as much as Hearts have struggled or will struggle, but that can also have an influence as well.
Michael, final word to you then. Again, sort of bringing in the Rangers point, is Rangers would always measure themselves against what Celtic are doing. Is it a case now that they just need to sort of park that for the time being and focus in-house, try and get things in order? Connor's rhymed off a list of 3 or 4 positions there that need sorting out at boardroom level. And then, the squad doesn't look like it might be capable of what Glenn's saying there, going Thursday to Sunday, in its current form.
I do think Dave King's kind of added fuel to the fire. Rangers has got enough problems at the moment about getting the skigging ready for the season. Obviously, I think they're going back in for, is it this weekend's game against Dundee in the Cup as well. I always think that, and maybe I would like to maybe ask Connor this question, but I think they sacked Van Bronckhorst too soon, because, he got you to a European final, but at least he got you there, and you were playing some kind of like decent kind of like football under him as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think at the time, the way results had seemed to really drop off, it became it became difficult. I mean, at the time he had dropped points in Paisley at St Mirren. He then went up to McDermott Park and lost. And, you know, with all due respect to St Johnstone, Rangers don't go to McDermott Park and lose. You just don't. You know, that's one of your kind of bread and butter games for a Rangers and Celtic that you should, even though it's away and it can be tricky, and I'm not saying that, you should still get a result there and win. And losing that, the wheels had seemingly come off, and it was, I don't think anybody's seen how we were going to get out of it. What I would say is that the decision making from the club in the aftermath of that wasn't good enough. I think if they were going to sack Van Bronckhorst as they did, they should have had a plan for who the next man was going to be, because it was never in a million years Michael Beale, who had literally, been at QPR for 5 minutes and had seemingly already turned down an offer for Wolves. I don't know how much is in that, but, for me, they needed to do better there, because I can't honestly say, and I don't know if you'd agree, Robert, but hand on heart, I can't say that it would have been any worse had Van Bronckhorst stayed on.
No, listen, it's all hindsight now, isn't it?
Of course it is, but it's about the decision making, and it's things like that they need to get better. Because if things do go wrong with Collum, for example, and he needs to be removed from his position, they need to have a plan for who would replace him, and then who's going to take it forward long term. Because the one thing we can't do, particularly with the financial situation, is we can't afford to keep sacking managers.
No.
You know what I mean? You need to get this right. Now, maybe it is that you back Collum. We're in a different climate than, Steven Gerrard came in, he got very lucky, because he came in at a time where we were in a climate of everybody knew the scale of the rebuild he was going to have to do. And as a young manager, you pretty much accepted this was going to take a couple of years. End up, it took 3. And he only got that time because people accepted that and could see just gradual improvements here and there. The most important thing, as you know, Robert, was that he managed to find a way of beating Celtic in head-to-head games, and that was huge for him. And so far,
that's going to be huge for any Rangers manager. You're going to be held up against what you do in those Old Firm games. Okay, look, I'm conscious of time. Glenn's done 3 shifts tonight, plus his full-time job. So I'm conscious to give the man some evening. So listen, there is, as you mentioned, League Cup games this weekend. We've obviously got Rangers Dundee, Celtic Falkirk, Aberdeen against the Spartans, and Motherwell Dundee United. So plenty of action to look forward to. We'll be back on the other side of that. Thank you to my guests, Michael McEwan, Glen Schreuder, and obviously Connor Chalmers as well. And thank you guys for joining us. If you like what you've seen, like, subscribe, leave us a comment, get involved with us on the socials as well, X and TikTok as well. So, yeah, we'll see you on the other side. Thanks very much for your time. Cheers.